know what's real. Yeah, I just know what's real.
He is an accomplished DJ, musician, and Grammy Award-winning producer. Is that correct? That is correct. You should feel free to speak into the microphone.
Okay.
So please, won't you join me in welcoming Mark Ronson?
Thank you. Thank you.
How you doing?
Good.
Yeah?
You know, Jeff used to be my boss. When I was 18, I used to write for this. I had these dreams of one day being a journalist for writing reviews of hip-hop albums and stuff. And Jeff ran the best zine, like in New York at the time, called Ego Trip, this hip-hop zine. And I used to bug him all the time to let me write reviews for it. I think one day you finally let me write a review of a Sadat X album.
No, there was a couple of reviews. You did do a couple of reviews for Ego Trip.
But one of them was an album that I think that you knew wasn't very good, and you wanted to test me because it was a review of the Sadat X album, and he knew that I was going to have to see Sadat X every night that I was out DJing in New York because he was just always out in the clubs at that time. So he was like, well, let me test your metal and see how much balls you have if you're ready for this writing shit. And he was right. I had no balls for it. And I was like, this album is really good.
And that was that the end of your journalism career there? You missed your calling, man.
I think so. I think in my mind, I think I had romantic illusions of it that just wasn't something I was very good at. But I always...
Actually, you were good at it. I'm not, you were good at it. The stuff you did was good, man. You know, not besides that one, but But that's neither here nor there. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Yep.
I guess what I like to do a lot of times in these sessions is, no matter who the person on the couch is, I never like to assume that everybody knows everything about everybody who comes through. So ask Mark if he might play something just as a little informal sort of mini introduction to what he does. So he's going to play a little something that is a part of his past repertoire, so you can get an idea of what he's all about.
This is a song that I wrote and produced. Actually, I'm going to play a different one because that one's not very good.
Are you a DJ? You're having a lot of trouble deciding what you're going to play.
Yeah. Okay. Which one's that? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, yo.
Meet you downstairs in the bar and heard your rolled up sleeves in your skull t-shirt. You say, what did you do with him today? And sniff me out like I was Tanqueray.
That sounds like a really shitty MP3. It's like you work your whole life making this thing that you hope someday people will listen to, and then you listen to some bullshit that you downloaded off of LimeWire version of it. Okay, I'll play this one. This one's an AIFF file, different song.
Same old safe bed.
And who is that?
That's his chick. Silly.
So, tell us a little bit about that track in particular.
Okay.
That's a big sounding record. I would use the word epic, except epic is kind of overused on the internet. So,
Right.
But some equivalent of epic.
I think that record was the first record that Amy and I wrote together on the album. And basically, she came to my studio. I hadn't really done anything that big of note yet. And I'd had my first record, Here Comes The Fuzz, that had a minor hit with Ooh-Wee. And then someone said, you should meet this girl, Amy. She's a great singer. And I remembered a song from her first album where she had sampled Made You Look by Nas, which is one of my favorite tracks. So I always used to play it at my DJ set. She came to my studio, and whenever I meet an artist for the first time, rather than do, I guess, what's the more traditional hip-hop R&B thing, you play tracks, and you play tracks, and you play tracks. You like this, you like this. I sat with her, and I asked her what kind of music she liked and what kind of album she wanted to make. And she told me she'd been listening to a lot of 60s jukebox pop music, like the Shangri-Las, and obviously a lot of Motown. That was something that we both listened to together. And I told her, I said, I don't have any tracks to play you, or anything that's very relevant or anything that sounds like what you're talking about, but come back tomorrow, because she was supposed to go back to England the next day, and I'll work on something. So I went in my studio, and I came up with that piano line that sounded kind of a little bit generic, but wasn't like a total ripoff, but like conjured up that era to me, that the Shangri-Las, songs like Remember Walking in the Sand. And then I took I'm not a drummer, but I can loop myself in Pro Tools. So I took a little kick drum, that boom, ksh, boom, boom, ksh. And that's all I had, just that rough thing of the keys. And she came back the next day, and I played it for her, and I said, what do you think of this? And I soaked the whole thing in spring reverb, so it sounded like one of those records. And she goes, yeah, I love it. And I thought she was bullshitting, because she was so, that's her whole thing. She's very understated. She goes, no, fuck it, I fucking love it. And she went in the other room to call her manager. It was literally a scene out of a movie. They're like, so what did Amy think of the track? I was like, I don't think she liked it, because she just went outside, and I think she's calling a car, and then, or something. And she came back, and he was like, oh, really? Because that was her other manager on the other line. Like, she wants to stay for like 2 weeks. And we made the rest of the record. And I believe Gabe Roth is speaking here this afternoon. And Gabe Roth is from the Daptone Records, and a brilliant producer and recording engineer. He had made a few records, the Dap Kings, that I really loved, and I loved old funk, and I loved the fact that their 45 sounded just like the real deal. And I played Amy a version that they had done. At the time, I didn't know the whole band, but I knew the horn players, because they had been working with me recording version, and they had played me this version that they had done of Uptight by Stevie Wonder for like a Citibank commercial or something. I'll play it for you a second of it. I just love it. I love it because I love the original. I love it because it's played well. I love it because it almost sounds like a magic trick. You hear that and you go, that was made yesterday? Like, are you fucking kidding me? I mean, obviously this sound is filtered a bit more into the mainstream, and we know that they can make songs that sound like that. But I played that for Amy, and I said, I've got these guys that should record our stuff, like these songs we've been working on. And we went to Gabe's studio in Bushwick in Brooklyn, and that's where we made, you know, the good chunk of Back to Black.
So with now, like you said, you know, it's a departure in a way from the typical process of you know, playing a track for a quote unquote R&B singer or somebody like that, and then having them just do something over it. This is something really building from the ground, from nothing. I guess, how long does that process take to do something like that particular song? Because you have, obviously, this elaborate string orchestration as well. There's a whole section in the middle where, you know, the tempo changes, which is, I think, is, you know, all what contributes to making that something very special. You know, because there's a sense of dynamic, there's a sense of, you know, things sort of breathing If you know what I mean, in terms of the arrangement. So I don't know. I guess that since we just heard that song, it just you just continuing on with that as a specific example.
I think that this song is something that I hadn't ever attempted to do a kind of grand production or anything like this before. And it was Amy, and it was recording the Dap Kings, those amazing musicians, and her songs and stuff that kept making me want to take it further. Like the part you're talking about where the tempo changes and actually goes into 6 and it becomes major. I thought that sounded like, when we did that, the chord change that, I thought it sounded almost too Radiohead to go from minor to major, and maybe it would just be the outro. And you get lazy, like when you're doing stuff like everything's Pro Tools and you're on the grid and you can move stuff around. In the 60s, I guess there was a bit more of an attentiveness to like arrangements, and people really like, you see those classical pictures of everyone like slaving over their like score sheets, and we don't really have to do that much anymore. And I just thought, there was a part of me in the back of my mind like, oh, this is going to be a fucking headache to go out of this tempo change and then go back into the song and go up, and I can't be bothered. And then there was a part of me saying like, no, actually it could be really great though if we did it. So I think the whole song, it took me about one night to lay the foundation of that track, and then Amy wrote the lyrics and the melody especially fast. It was like about half a day. And then we probably recorded the rhythm track in 3 hours. We did the whole of Back to Black in 5 days, all the rhythm tracks, and then we spent about a day each on strings. And Amy really didn't want to do strings because to her, every time I said strings, she thinks like violins, like get that Mariah Carey bullshit out of my face. Like she didn't really want to do strings anywhere. And I remember having a conversation with her. I was like, we should do the orchestra. And she'd be like, no, I hate it. And I was like, well, all the songs that you love, all these Shangri-Las, the thing that makes those the arrangements so great is the orchestra. And she's like, she just kept telling me like till she was blue in the face, like I don't fucking want to get that shit out of my face. So then I told her, I was like, I'll pay for it then. If you don't like it, you just take it off. We take it off. She's like, don't waste your fucking money. Like she's really just had like wouldn't have it. So I had to do it without telling her. I did the strings without telling her, and I went and I did this arrangement. And it was like the day that we were mixing, the first song that we mixed on the album, Love Is a Losing Game. You can hear, I'll play like a second of it just so you can hear how big a part of the strings really are. Anyway, so you can hear that that's a pretty big part of the song. So she didn't come to the studio to hear. She didn't know I put the strings down until we're mixing, like the final thing. And at that point, we were mixing the song for a whole day. If we came in and if she had just said take the strings out, it wouldn't have it would have been like a pain in the ass and kind of ruined the record. And so she's like listening the whole time with her head down on the console, like for 2.5 minutes, and I couldn't see the expression on her face, and I was just like, oh please, I like it. She like just jumps up at the end of the song, and she goes like, I don't know, like, come here Ronnie Chops, and she gives me like a hug, and then she goes, and then without missing a beat, she just goes, just take that Mariah Carey heart bullshit out of the third breakdown, all right? And then just walks out the room. So anyway, so
Yeah.
yes,
So that was that.
that was that.
So I was going to ask this question later, but it seems like as good a time as any. You work with a number of different prominent vocalists. What is this, as a producer, what is the psychology that is necessary to work with vocalists? I mean, very talented vocalists, but what is the psychology that's necessary for you to get that performance out of them?
I think there's a lot of different kind of producers. You know, there's the kind of I guess there's you have the diplomat, you have the kind of producers like the Ross Robinsons of the world. You hear about like these guys that produce like metal bands and like get them to throw chairs before they go in and do a drum take, like, I want you angry. And I just don't have that within me to do that. And I think that I think I'm probably more in the thing of the diplomat. I think when you're lucky enough to have a singer like Amy who's gonna sing it 4 times, and each take's going to be kind of brilliant, and you're just going to have to decide through the by comping the vocal how you're going to steer the melody, because she's a bit more of a jazz singer, so each take has quite a bit of improvisation in it. Then there are other singers that are more insecure, maybe not as naturally gifted, that you have to bring something out of and you have to coax them, and it's hard to say because everyone's different. I would say that I've been lucky enough, even if we're not talking about somebody like with a barreling, super huge voice, somebody with just a beautiful tone texture like Lily Allen, I've been really lucky to work with people that have a really gifted, like all their tones are so unique, and even their kind of fuck ups are kind of good in a way, you know. I've never had to work with the sort of modern pop Pro Tools auto-tune sort of ingenue. Like, I wouldn't know what to do there anyway, because I don't know how you know when you have a good take, because all you're just going to do is tune the shit out of it anyway. You just, I guess, from what I know, you get them to sing it 20 times, then you just kind of take the best stuff.
Let's go back a little bit. You know, we've heard something that you're well known for. Let's go back a little bit and just get back to your
When
first,
you were shit.
when you were doing a band called the Whole Earth Mamas. What can you tell me about that?
That's low, Mal.
But what I'm saying is, back when you started out, how did you get into it?
That was my first band. It was a band we played sort of like Lenny Kravitz and Black Crowes covers. We were all like 14 years old and playing around New York, and that was the thing at the time. It was like funk rock. It was Living Colour, bands like that, and we played in shitty bars and thought we were probably good when we really weren't. And that was my first experience with having rappers. We would have rappers come up on stage with us because most of the band was really into hip hop, but we were a shitty bar band. Like, we weren't the Roots, so it just sounded really like sloppy, drunken rap karaoke. And that's when I got really into hip hop. At that point, that I started collecting vinyl, and a little bit down the line, I got turntables, and then it's like any kid when you get a bicycle, your new toy or whatever it is, the old toy stays in the corner collecting dust, and my guitar started collecting dust, and all I wanted to do was DJ and play hip hop all the time.
What was the first hip hop record you got?
I remember the first 4 12-inches I bought when I went to the store were Reminisce by Pete Rock and CL Smooth, because they weren't all out at the time. These were my favorite records. These are the ones I knew that I wanted. Ziggy Raking in the Dough, Mary J. Blige, the Reminisce remix, and Diggable Planets, Rebirth of Slick.
So, but before that, you were studying instruments, guitar, saxophone also?
I played a little bit of saxophone in the 5th grade, and then I stopped. I wasn't very good at it. I thought I could just like play everything and I'd be like good without trying, and that doesn't ever happen. So I decided to just stick with guitar. And I wasn't an exceptionally good guitarist either. There was a really flashy, great guitar player in my band named Mike Pollard, and he could play like crazy shit. And he had like some huge amp with every time he turned his amp on, like he'd have like a rig up to here, and it sounded like an airplane was taking off, and I'd just be like, blook, like to my little jazz chorus. And he was awesome, and he would shred, and then every now and then they'd be like, all right, you take a solo now, and I'd be like, no. But it was cool because I enjoyed that. I didn't mind that. I understood like a lot of my favorite bands had like a good rhythm guitarist, and I was always drawn to the rhythm. That was the stuff that I was better at anyway. And even now when I play guitar on my own records, it's all, meters, James Brown type lines, Right.
Well, maybe that made an easier transition to DJing.
Definitely.
Maybe.
But my first instrument was the drums when I was a kid, when I was 4. I was always drawn to things that were more rhythmically inclined. I always listened to the bass line in a record before I listened to even the melody, or the drums before I listened to the lyrics. That's just how my brain works.
Can you talk a little bit about, when you first started DJing? I mean, you're known for DJing. Sort of set the scene, I guess, a little bit from that time back then. It was an exciting time. You know, I remember going to the parties and stuff like that. Just, you know, you can talk a little bit about getting started and getting into that whole world and where it took you.
Yeah, I started DJing at a point in New York around the mid '90s, and at that time, there was like a really, first of all, the music at that era, that what people kind of call the golden era of hip hop, was really exciting. It was all Tribe and Dre and Snoop in the beginning of Wu-Tang, and the clubs in New York, I guess it was having this renaissance of what had happened in the 80s when downtown had met uptown. It was like Blondie and Africa Bambaataa. I don't think it was as culturally impactful, but you had these great DJs like Stretch Armstrong and Funkmaster Flex and some lesser knowns like Jules, and playing a great funk and soul and hip hop, and the crowds were mixed all the time. And I would just go in there and hassle the promoters till I got to open for Stretch one night and started to make a name for myself. And then you know, slowly, you know, some of the rappers that I looked up to and respected, from this like Gangstar and Q-Tip to Jay-Z and Puffy, start coming to where I'm DJing, and they're going, oh, Puffy's asked me for my number. I like the way you DJ, and taking me to DJ stuff parties for him, and I'm like, I can't even. It was all such a blur. Like, what am I leaving out?
It was
Something
all
important.
a dream, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess also just like, you know, collecting records at the time and everything. I mean, that's, you know, you kind of, I remember, you know, just getting into production a lot. It seemed like everybody was collecting records and trying to get into production and stuff like that as well. And, you know, we had the Roosevelt Show, and you'd go see people to buy records.
Jeff
and
was
things like
such a snob because he knew about every record, and I was like this little kid, like coming around, like, what's that? Like, tell me about that. What's that drum break? And I used to go over to Jeff's house like a few times, and his crates, like every record in there was like some amazing, rare, like Latin, like funk breaker stuff, and he'd be like, no, you don't know about that, kid. Here, just stick to this James Brown. That's fine. No, actually, he was really friendly, and like it was Jeff and a few people like Jules and a few other DJs that actually really informed and taught me about records like Phaso, Riding High, and just the kind of really cool records that was sort of the standards of those days, and a little less known than the James Brown, the Kool and the Gang that everyone else heard. And then, yeah, it was a really exciting time. There were record conventions that they go to in these hotels, and you would have all these rare records, some of them that had been sampled by your favorite rap songs, and then you'd see your favorite rappers and producers walking around there, like you'd have to get there at 7 in the morning to like get the good stuff, and it was really exciting. And I remember if you found one record you're really proud of, you like carry it around under your arm like all day, hoping that somebody would see you, like one of your heroes, like maybe one of the guys from the Beat Nuts is gonna go like, what's that kid doing with that record? Hey, come over here. Like, never gonna happen. But it was super exciting, and vinyl was amazing, and the only thing about this Serato era that sometimes bums me out is you can't fight technology and its brilliant and the advances that it's made, but it makes it very easy for everybody to have everything all the time, and you don't have to really earn it or deserve it or wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning all the time to get those records. And that was not only was it earning it, it was actually quite fun, because it made you actually care about those records. And when you had your one copy of some Roy Ayers produced record that Tribe Called Quest sampled, you were really psyched, and you know that you would earn your stripes to have it in your collection.
Yeah, it's not like that anymore.
Let me talk about the old days.
But I guess you know, at that point, the DJing thing really did take off for you, though.
It did. I think that I was playing in clubs, some clubs like Cheetah and Life that were kind of the hip hop crowds, and you'd still have kids and skateboarders and rappers and drug dealers and Jay-Z, and these people started to come to these clubs, and I was one of the better DJs, I think, in that scene, and I played a lot of funk and soul and classics that they enjoyed that, and mixed with hip-hop. And then also, myself and Stretch Armstrong started to incorporate a little bit of rock and roll in the set. I mean, we had all been playing songs like Miss You by the Stones, and songs that were just classic, classic hip-hop rock songs that were always ended up in hip hop set. But I guess we started playing other stuff and became sort of known for that. And I remember one time 10 years ago at some party, I was DJing for Jay-Z's album release, Rock La Familia, and Little Kim and Method Man are like standing up on a table singing like "I Love Rock and Roll," which is the most like cliche song now to ever play in a DJ set. And I hate the fact that we even started playing those records, because now it's just like you can't even go into any like bullshit club in the West End or wherever you are in the world and hear like "Under the Bridge" by the Red Hot Chili Peppers or some song that shouldn't be played in a hip hop DJ set. But that's what we were doing. I guess we thought it was interesting at the time, just stretching boundaries and thinking. I remember playing "I Love Rock and Roll" and thinking that was quite cool. I mean, you can't really blame us for it's like blaming the Beastie Boys for Limp Bizkit. It's just like, but we did do things to ruin it.
There was some sense of order, like you're saying, though, right? I mean, in terms of, there were songs that you would incorporate into a set from different genres because in a hip hop mindset, it would work.
And you'd have to make sure your transitions are great, and you would throw in like the MOP, you were playing MOP ante up, and then you quickly bust into the acapella and then throw Back in Black under it or A Whole Lot of Love or something. Like it always had to have alchemy, and then you had great DJs like Z-Trip that were more pure mashup, but that was what their whole thing was about.
So, one of the, on our first day here, everybody who's in this room, who's a participant, had to sit on this couch and get asked a few questions. And one of them was their favorite DJ nightmare story. You being a quote-unquote celebrity DJ, are you immune to the nightmare story?
No, not at all. I've had so many nightmare stories.
So please share.
I think the worst is only really the worst ones when I haven't played in a while and I'm rusting, or you're so nervous that you do the classic like take the needle off the wrong turntable, the one that's playing, and or like one time I think this was only 3 weeks ago. I was DJing at this club in New York called Santos Party House, and I hadn't DJed in a while, and I decided I was going to bring real vinyl out to the club to play with Serato just because it would be fun. And I was playing it's on Q-Tips night, and I think I turned the wrong fader down. It was like a 3 fader, and so instead of just like turning it back up, I just went into complete panic mode and just started like touching everything. Like that guilty look when you know the floor is everyone's saying it, so you're just like, it's not me, I just had a shot of tequila and now this mixer is acting funny. So I just was like, I basically just shut the power off on everything. And the sound guy like ran up in the booth. He was like, what the hell is going on here? Because he'd never seen me before. He thought I was like some ham and egg opening DJ or something.
So don't turn the power off
No,
your
don't
recommended.
just start like going like that. Like, would you do that in a cockpit? I don't think so. Don't do it in the booth.
Can you talk a little bit about just getting into production and doing beats and what led to the first projects that you did, which, your album as well as the Nick Acosta record and stuff like that?
Basically, DJing in clubs was really invaluable in a way because I was always around artists and stuff. So there was this guy I knew who managed D'Angelo and a few other people, and he had this girl, he said, that could sing this brilliant voice. And he came up to me one time I was DJing, and he was like, I have this girl, I don't know what she should sound like. I just know that I wanted to sound like one of your DJ sets. Like, I want her to basically sound like a cross between EPMD, Biggie, AC/DC, and all that stuff. So that was my first production break, and I got it out of DJing because of the stuff that I was known for in the sets. And should I play a tiny bit of it? This girl. Yeah. So that was this girl, Nick Acosta, and that was 2000 and it came out 2001. Yeah. Could not be used because the file could not be found.
Quick, shut the power off.
Yeah.
Coming out of a prison well, only echoes only hear my prayer.
So that was like I guess that was my heroes at the time, production wise, were DJ Premier. Like, and you can I think kind of hear that I was just trying to imitate the feel and the swing of a. Should I play like a Premier track just so they can hear
sure.
what I'm talking about? So I don't know if this is as obvious to you listening to it as it was to me making it, but that kind of stab. What's a good Premier one?
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Freedom of jail, clips inserted. A baby's being born, same time a man is murdered.
Premier was really famous for that kind of swing on the drums and the way he would sample stabs and move it around. So I was, and then the little sort of Beatles guitar sound in the chorus and the sly-ish stuff. I guess that Nika Costa record was a bit of an amalgam of all my influences. But I remember DJing that Nika Costa song for the first time in New York. It was a party. It was for the album release of D'Angelo's Voodoo, and DJ Premier came in the booth, and I'd never met him. And he's standing there, and I played that record. I think I was already playing it. And he's just standing there like this. And I'm like, oh, he's going to ask who's doing this. And he's going to say, like, who's ripping off my whole shit. And he looks up, and he's like, what is this? I was like, it's Nika Costa, sir. Like, just trying to be as polite as possible. And he's like, well, who made the beat? I was like, I did. He goes, and just for 3 minutes, he's just doing this in the booth. I don't even know if he heard it as a tribute, or what it, or he just didn't hear the bite at all. But it was pretty cool. That was the first time I ever met him, and he was, I guess, he was digging that beat.
What did you learn from the process of doing that record and that project?
I learned a lot because I co-produced the record with Nika and her husband Justin, who came from much more of a rock background, but he knew a lot about miking, drums, and recording like a whole band in a studio setup. Whereas for me, being a producer just meant having a drum machine and a mic to record rappers. So that definitely broadened my mind. And then I learned about computers, watching the back of his head basically on Logic. I just sit behind him for the whole time and just see how that worked. And then I just learned. It was kind of a little bit of a difficult album to make because they were not coming from a hip-hop aesthetic at all. They had lived in Australia. So every time she'd start to sing a song, and I'd be on my MP, and I'd be like, oh, that's cool. And I'd start to make a beat like that beat, like, dun, and she'd be like, oh, like making fun of like hip-hop. And I was like, it would just seriously bum me out. And it was always this fight. That Like a Feather song was originally like a very sort of The Who style rock. Like, and it would have been cool and no one ever would have heard it. But I think the fact that the way our influences came together made something weird. And you do get that battle a lot, and that makes good stuff. It's not always supposed to be easy in the studio. You hear, people talking about stories that they made their best records and they're leaving the vocal booth crying, and that's just how it goes. Right. But we did... I learned a lot about making that record. And what I learned a lot about, too, was the hype machine, because that song was on MTV, heavy rotation, and Tommy Hilfiger commercial. Like, basically all the stars were lined up, and everybody told me I'd be walking down the street, and people would go to my mother, like, hey, good with your son, you're going to be able to retire soon. Like, and everyone was saying this is going to be the biggest record ever. And it came out, and it kind of just bombed. And it was an amazing first lesson to have in the recording industry, because it's like no matter how big everyone tells you it's going to be, and it can be on MTV heavy rotation, all this kind of shit, the bottom can just fall out, and that's just how it goes. And it's a record that came out and it was respected, and it got my foot in the door and whatever, but it was definitely not a commercial success whatsoever. But I like the fact that my first lesson was really don't believe the hype, like in the truest sense of the expression.
Mm-hmm. And with your first solo album, in what ways was that experience different or similar for you?
My first solo album, I got signed up by this guy, Josh Deutsch at Elektra, because he really liked that Nika Costa beat. So it really did kind of lead to the thing, and things do. If you make something that's good, and even if it's not commercial, you can obviously lead to good things sometimes. And I couldn't believe, in my mind, it was just like, holy shit, Elektra Records is going to give me a blank checkbook to work with every rapper that I've ever loved since I was 9 years old. I didn't think for 1 second, like, I'm making an album and this has to sell. Obviously, I think that my taste in the stuff that I make is like, I'm not making like weirdo blip, like minimal techno. I know that this stuff is kind of, my ear is slightly commercial and not cool at times. But I thought that I would just make a record with these people that I loved, and people like Sean Paul, Freeway, Jack White, Ghostface, Nate Dogg, M.O.P., Mos Def. And it was a really fun record to make. And I made it in New York, and it felt like I was making it just the stuff I liked. And I never thought for a moment, because England ended up being the only place where we had a bit of success, because I had grown up in England till I was 8 but moved to New York, but obviously some of my tastes and sensibilities were unmistakably English. I didn't think about it for 1 second while I was making the record, but it made sense once it was all done that it resonated here a bit more, because it just, for whatever reason, the style, the taste, the eclecticism of it just didn't work in America at all, but let me come here and have a minor hit with Ooey, and then spend a lot of time here, which led to me meeting Amy and Lily, and just kind of steering my musical path for the past 5 years.
Well, by the eclecticism, can you give an example of how that might manifest itself, or explain a little bit
On a
more?
record?
Yeah, on that record in particular.
Yeah, I could play. I guess the eclecticism, it was a bit across the whole record, because I was a little bit, I was like 25 years old. Someone just gave me a shitload of money to make a record, and I was just like, what I want to do is I want to show what my 3-hour DJ set would be like condensed into a 40-minute album. So it's just, when you're DJing, you need 3 hours to build the arc. To get from rock and roll to disco to soul and hip hop and all that stuff, you need an arc, and it has to be clever. And in the course of trying to fit that into a 33-minute record, it can sound quite spasmodic. I guess there's well, I guess I'd have to play maybe 2 records to see maybe how across the board it is. But this is a record with Jack White and Freeway and Nika Costa on it.
Ronson, Freeway all day. Here come the fuzz. The fuzz homes. If you ain't with that, then keep on marching on. We bring you the fuzz homes. If you ain't with that, then keep on pressing on. The fuzz homes. If you ain't with that, then keep on marching on. We bring the fuzz homes. If you ain't with that, then keep on.
Here's like a disco record. What?
The world seems so cold, and you got
Here's a reggae record.
I make we roll in the right pop the Chris wallet. I got the Chris bills in my wallet. You should know when me floss in nobody can't come stall it. Anything you wanna feel for call it. Shonda Paul, Mark Ronson, and we're there up on it.
It's like, hello, can we have a little bit of a plot here? But I'm still really proud of that record, and I love like when I play DJ sets and play Ooey, and it's like fun, and it's like it's been in like Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle and Honey, all sorts of amazing films. For a while, that publishing actually paid my rent.
So I guess the question is then, how do you get from this point to the stuff that you did for the next record and the stuff you were doing for the likes of Amy Winehouse and whatnot?
I think, to be completely honest, I had a little bit of buzz with the Nika Costa record, and like anything, buzz is quite fleeting, and especially in the music industry, like you hop for a second, and the buzz extended itself to allow me, of Nika's record, to make this album, my solo record. And when they both kind of tanked, I all of a sudden wasn't really that hot anymore. And and to be honest, like didn't really deserve to be. I hadn't had any hits, and there were a lot of people that I was friendly with in the early days, like sort of Pharrell and Chad from the Neptunes and Kanye in the beginning. We were both working with this rapper named Gabe Roth. What's up? We were both working with this rapper named Rhymefest and just whatever. And I saw, and then even at the very last minute, Danger Mouse, I just saw these people that were at one point seemed like my peers, like just kind of skyrocket past me. And I was like, maybe I'm just not that good at this. Like in a really honest, self-reflecting way, like maybe I'm not as good as I thought I am. Maybe I'm not supposed to be doing this. And I had a girlfriend and a dog, and I started to think like maybe I should just be doing music for commercials, and I can get like a little bit of a, I can pay for my life without having to sit home waiting for like A&R morons to call me. And I think it was that point that I really didn't sort of care anymore about making things that sounded competitive with what was on the radio, going into A&R meetings and sitting and playing a bunch of beats that I was hoping someone would like because it sounded a bit like the Neptunes hit that was on the radio. And I just said, fuck it. And it wasn't a conscious decision, but around that time, someone asked me to make a cover of a Radiohead song, if I wanted to do a cover of a Radiohead song for an album. And I said, yeah. And because of that point, I basically thought, like, well, what does it matter? No one's ever going to really get my shit, so I'll just make the shit that I really like, which is really why you're supposed to make music in the first place. But if you live in New York in a rat race, or your labels around you and that stuff, you can lose your voice and identity if you're not on it. So I made that cover of the Radiohead Just, and I'll play a little bit of the original, and then I'll play the less good version here. So this is one of my favorite Radiohead songs. So for this BBE compilation, I said that I'd do a version of it, and I sat. So here's. And I sat with my friend Dave Guy, the trumpet player, and I thought it would be cool to take the horns and make the horns do what the guitars are doing, because it's just like a very James Brown funky drummer type breakbeat. If we start putting heavy guitars over it, it's going to eat up the whole thing, and it's not going to be very funky anymore. And so I sat with Dave, and I just noticed once we put the horns on and kind of finished the song and had Alex Greenwald do the vocal, I started playing at my DJ sets, and I realized that it was the most exciting part of the night. People were really into it. People would be like, oh, what is this shit? We've never heard anything like this before. So I just started making more of them for fun. I started to make just covers of songs that I really liked, and kind of Dave and I would sit and write the horn arrangements, and the DAP tone horn players would come in and would just lay them down. And there was no rhyme or reason to it. I just enjoyed making them. And I was always a big fan of the obscure cover version, or the slightly eccentric cover version of 60s pop songs, whether it was Stevie Wonder doing "We Can Work It Out" or just stuff like that. And I'm so bored. What am I talking about? What was the question? I'm amazed you're not asleep. Sorry.
You were talking about how the album came into being, but
yeah.
So you did more of these covers, and basically you came up with an album.
You
right?
did some more. I should have thought about doing this more as an interpretive dance piece. I'm sorry, we could have done it. And then, and at that time I met Lily Allen in a nightclub, and she was like talking about the music she liked. She was like, I really like Jay-Z, I really like Specials, I really like all these things that didn't make sense to me. And I was like, well, that sounds cool. I'll listen to your demo. And I heard it. It was cool. And I brought her out to New York. Right. And to reiterate, not that I was curled up in the fetal position crying myself to sleep every night, but I was just like, no one was checking me for me. So I flew Lily out my air miles, put her up at the Howard Johnson or the Holiday Inn in the middle of Chinatown, in the middle of like the first bird flu scare. So she was freaked out. She didn't tell me. She went and stayed with someone else and would show up to the studio every day. And actually, she would walk back to the Holiday Inn because I'd pick her out in front because she didn't want to offend me that she was moved out of the Holiday Inn or something. So that was that. And then Lily and I made some music together, and one song for her album, one song for mine. And then I met Amy a month later through this gentleman, Guy Moot at EMI Publishing, who just said, I'm going to send this girl around to your house. And then we started working.
And the rest is history. But I think it's in, you know, you following your instincts and what you were into, though. Obviously, it was convenient in a way, too, because, I mean, the sound of hip-hop is changing quite a bit over that time. It is where it is now. It wasn't necessarily what you were drawn to initially either, I would think. Maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but you
What
know, you
was
tell
what
me.
I was drawn to?
I mean, obviously hip-hop inspired you, got you
Yes.
into what you were doing.
Yes.
But where hip-hop was around the time you were making this stuff, and you decided that
You
were
mean
being
the toilet?
when you were being reflective, well, you can
Yes.
say what you wish.
No, I know. I understand that, you know, I was DJing a lot in New York, and I always think that it should be about progress, and I think that just to sit around and complain about the current state of things and try and put your head in the sand and ignore where music is going is a little bit dangerous, but it's okay to like the good shit as well. And there are always going to be little highlights and stuff that comes around that's good, but at that time, Q-Tip and I started a party called Authentic Shit, where we just played stuff that we thought was great and playing a lot of sort of golden era hip-hop, and I think that has always been the biggest influence on my sound as far as the drums and that kind of stuff sound in our records, you know.
So you did this album. You did the Amy stuff. We've heard examples of that. This is you playing a lot of the instruments yourself, as well as using the Dap Kings.
Yeah, on my album, I played most of the stuff except for the horns. But then I'd started to make my album version before. We had gone and done Back to Black, and we showed up. I showed up to Daptone, to Gabe's studio, and he was putting a mic up or setting up a mic. It was the first day on Homer's drum kit. And I was like, literally, like, I felt like I just walked into, like, the pearly gates. It was like, oh, because I couldn't believe that it sounded like every hip-hop RZA, like, crusty drum break that I'd always loved, except there was a guy playing it. So he could play fills and he could do whatever, and he could, you know, and I didn't have to, I don't know what it was. It was just like, that was my sort of eureka moment. And I guess at that point, I'd already made much of version, so I'd already kind of played that. But I guess if I had met those guys a month or 2 months before, then they probably would have ended up playing most of version as well.
Right. So then you know you've had this sort of funk sort of foundation with the music and stuff like that. You know, it's very readily apparent. You know, the homage to the old soul and funk and stuff like that. So now where are you? What do you? Where's your mind now, and what you want to do next?
Well, I think I love the soul and that sound of it, and that's some of my favorite music ever. No matter what happens, you go through phases for 3 months where you like this thing or whatever. I always go back to that, and nothing will ever fill a dance floor like "I Want You Back" by the Jackson 5 or a James Brown record. At 150 years from now, they'll be playing that at alien bar mitzvahs and weddings and whatever it is. It's just what it is. There's something when you combine an amazing rhythmic track with a melody or a captivating performance on top. But I do have to. I realize that especially in this country, England, where Amy's record was so big, my record was really big, and just the filter down of other people copying our sound, for my own pride and for the sake of, you know, people not going and making a trumpet bonfire, I realized that we have to let the for my own, I guess I just was like, fuck it, I can't do this again. And it's a drag because I love that music, but at the same time, and if the version wasn't as big as it was, I could maybe go and do it again for a few more records. But I was basically coming off producing a record for Duran Duran, one of my favorite bands from when I was a kid. And I learned a lot about all these amazing analog 70 synthesizers from Nick Rhodes, who just taught me about not only the Roland and stuff like that, but keyboards like the Elka, the Italo disco synths, and more obscure stuff. And coming out of that, I just fell in love with the texture and the tones of it. And when it was time to start working on my new record again this past summer, I just wheeled in about 12 keyboards to Tommy and Homer's studio, and was like, all right, now we're using this. And it was great, and it was like fun. It was like a little bit of a learning curve, and there was almost like, I mean, everyone can actually play keyboards, obviously, but just the way the oscillators and things work, it was a bit like the first few days for like the opening scene in 2001, where like the gorillas discover the fire, and they're like, "Urgh, urgh." Like everyone's like, what is this? Like, and everyone's switching instruments, and it's like all mayhem. But I think a lot of good stuff came out of that, and I think my new record, it's nearly done. It's definitely got the rhythm section and the feel of and Homer's playing and the drum sound that sort of Gabe passed on to Tommy, that who's recorded my record, is still in there, but it's got a lot more synths, and it's got a heavy, it's like there's elements of, there's sort of a French Jean-Michel Jarre, like Daft Punk element in the synths, and the stuff is all played. I mean, there's this one record, I could play you a second of one thing.
A quick second of something.
Okay. I don't want to. Well, this one's like fucking super duper electro. This is like, the whole record isn't this hardcore, but I love all the 70s Moog instrumental records, and this kind of has a vibe of that. And the other thing, technologically, like any DJs in here, there's a thing, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, called the Controller One. It's a turntable that Vestax made, where it's like a regular turntable. It just plays a long tone, and then it has 8 keys that you can assign the notes to, so depending on what scale you're playing in. So if you're like Turntable Wizard, you can play a melody by and scratching on the fader and controlling it at the same time. So I had this kid, Tico, this DJ from the Bay Area, come and double this melody that I had written. You can kind of hear it on the thing. So that's kind of like a mix of Apache and Rocket and weird Moog records, and then also with the melody played on the turntable.
So he's doubling up the melody.
Yeah, I'm playing the
keyboard.
thing, and then also what's cool about that turntable is it has MIDI information. So if I play the actual melody, then all he has to do is manipulate the turntable for the movement. He doesn't actually have to change the pitch. It's a really cool. It's a cool thing. It's more impressive to see in action because it's actually the way the hands are moving so fast, and you can see that they're playing it.
You mentioned.
In other words, you had to be there.
You mentioned working with Duran, some of your heroes. You've also talked in the past, I think, a little bit about just meeting your heroes and working with them. So if you can, I don't know, how's that experience been? Is it, and in general, what are your sort of views on meeting some of your heroes and working with them? And
I think it's I think that it's pretty daunting because you always, there's that thing like you never want to meet your heroes because what if they're a dick or they're mean and then you can never enjoy their music again, or the fact that going even more, what you were saying, going in the studio with them, just because I love Duran, up to that point my sound was like a very specific thing and not at all what they're known for. So there's a very good chance it would be like a recipe for disaster. But I think there's all those jitters and that thing about meeting the people that you love. Usually, unless you're like a psycho, you can get over that in a day or something. And that kind of sweet like thing, that fanboy thing goes away, and then you realize you have to work. But it's working with Duran Duran has been kind of amazing, because it did seem like on paper something that wouldn't really make sense, because I like Duran Duran's records that they made 25 years ago. So it's like to get them to go back without insulting them and having them feeling like they're regressing, but to reclaim the sound that they did then was kind of the goal going in. And it was like the scene in the movie where they were like going down into the basement, like pulling out these storage cases buried of all their old keyboards and stuff from, that they haven't used since the 4th album. And it's really exciting, and the way it's coming about, and it's the way that it's the keyboards and what I've learned from that record has informed my own new record has been invaluable.
And when, how far in the process are you with that right now?
We've got everything recorded, the music and stuff, and we're just waiting. The last process is Simon Le Bon writing his lyrics. So basically we write all the songs in a room. He sings like blah, 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 like lyrics, and then with the melody. And then right now we're in the studio every day, actually today as well, just fitting words into the blah, blah, blah.
And have you noticed any special psychology involved in dealing with, working with the heroes as opposed to working with other
They're going to
talent?
see this. I don't want to start telling them like the manipulation tactics that I've been
I guess
using
if
on
not,
them.
yeah, that's true. You don't want to reveal all your Jedi mind
No, it's not the
tricks.
secrets. For you guys can know it all. It's just like, oh, that's why he said that he liked the. No, I don't know. Yeah, I think that. I think with a band like that, I think I had it in the back of my head, like, oh, it'd be really cool to make a song that felt like Save a Prayer today. Like, and even if you just have that in the back of your head, you're not going to go in and start copying the chord change and that stuff, but you can sort of subconsciously, the producer has a lot of control of psychic energy in a room. Like, you don't even have to say, we're going to do this, but just to steer it sometimes. That's just what happens in a room when people are creating, and that's definitely been I think a bit of the experience. But then they've also made some stuff that sounds very young and exciting and like a brand new band. It's cool.
I guess with regards to your own records, you being a producer and musician and DJ, not a vocalist. Although you did rap on one of your records briefly. Will we be seeing more of that?
I am singing. I'm singing on a song on my new album,
Okay.
and it's a song that Ghostface is rapping on as well, which is like basically the musical equivalent of like the little kid that comes around the corner starts starting shit with like the kids, and they all run around the corner chasing him, and like his 12 big brothers are like behind the corner, so no one can really say anything about my singing because Ghostface is just around the corner. But yeah, I'm singing 2 songs just because I wanted to try it, and I thought my voice fit the song maybe better than some other people. And but yeah, I mean, it's a strange thing to go from what I was, which is the DJ and a behind-the-scenes producer, to the successive version made us have to tour it, and then I actually had to go out and actually say things into the microphone in between songs, and you just learn how to do that.
I mean, who's, as far as producers go, who had their sort of, I mean, there is an anthology sort of quality to doing these projects in some respect, because there is a different vocalist on many of the songs, or a different rapper or something like that. Who did you look towards as far as, like, I don't know, inspiration or...
Well, definitely I probably looked more towards the sort of aesthetically and just stylistically a bit more like the Quincy Jones and that era of producer records, and because they weren't there. I guess with Version it wasn't like I don't know. I guess it was just I didn't want to do that on my first record. I tried to like ramrod every song with tons of stars, almost to the point of looking obnoxious, and that record sort of tanked. And went on this record, I just wanted the songs to have their own identity. So yeah, I didn't really look to anyone. I mean, there's so many of those records, and usually they're pretty fucking awful. And like, I don't want to be making those for 10 years from now, like Mark Ronson featuring this one, track 2, Mark Ronson featuring this one. I'd like to make records that sort of, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about.
Yeah, well, Quincy Jones is a good model to sort of follow, I would think.
Yeah.
Can you share some good Ghostface stories with us?
Actually, you know, it's so weird. I've done a few songs with Ghostface now. I did Ooey on my first record. I did, as soon as Amy and I had mixed You Know I'm No Good off her record, I knew that Ghostface was the person that should rap over it, that he'd sound great. But the weird thing is I'd never really spoken to him that much, because you know how it is. Yeah. You send someone the track and the MP3 and they send back the rap and they go, oh, you like it, good. And so I was drunk. I was a little bit drunk out the other night, and I got a text that Ghostface had just finished his rap on the new song, the song that I sent him. And so I get a text from his manager. It just says, Ghost is finished, call him. So I'm such a pussy, I was just going to pretend like I didn't see it. And I was like, oh, he won't know that I didn't see it. I'm not going to call him, because I don't want to call Ghostface, because he might hear like what an idiot I am, or like maybe he thinks I'm cool. Like, I don't know. And then all the mystery is ruined, and then he doesn't want to do another record again. And I spoke to him for a while, and I was like, fuck, I gotta call him. So he picked up the phone. He's like, oh, what's up? So we're talking for a while, and we spoke for like 20 minutes, and he's talking to me, and he really was like, so like sweet, and like talking about the history of the different kinds of records that we've done together. He's like, I know you and me have this chemistry, like we need to do a whole record together and like go on tour, like, and all this shit. And like people walking by, like, who on the phone with? I'm like, Ghostface, I'll be right down. So that's like having a cigarette at this bar. And it was just like amazing. And he's like, yo, listen, anything else you want me to do on your record, like send it to me. Like I'm down to do it. It's like the next morning, I'm sure he like looked in his inbox, and there was like track 5, track 7, track 8. I'll play a little bit of the Ghostface here. Oh, okay. He's so good. Is it in there?
Yo, I keep my guards up when it comes to the women. Tone knew that ever since the beginning. That's why I stay in clubs down in the white linen. Cause y'all girls is poison, peace to Mike Bivens. I couldn't let you go and you know that. I can't see another man trying to blow that. That's critical, love shots hurting me. Dr. Wigzo said I need therapy. Torment, misery is killing me physically, but murdering me legally. I love you convincingly. So I'ma close my eyes and just pretend. Cause word on the streets, I'ma lose it in the air.
All right. Ghost.
Oh, Ghost.
I want to ask you one more thing before we start to open things up for questions for everybody in here. Discussion of your music is frequently prefaced by mention of your celebrity. Right. And I wanted to know how you feel about that.
I think that I got celebrity DJ is like obviously like a little bit of a backhanded. It's not even a backhanded compliment, because there's no compliment in it. It's just like a weird thing. And I think when I started to DJ in those downtown clubs and started making a name for myself, and you can vouch for me, Jeff, right? I was down. No, I just think that like there was like a certain scene that never heard of me before. Maybe the more serious DJ press, like the mix man, because all of a sudden I'm this DJ and playing at these parties for Puff and whatever. And I think that people wanted to assume it was because, you know, I had a stepdad that was in a famous rock band or something like that. And no offense to my stepdad, he made some amazing music. He's in this band Foreigner, but no one. It's not like we were the Jaggers or McCartney. He's like, no one's picking him out of a police lineup. And they just started calling me that. And I think I might even have like the terrible like honor of being the first person to ever be called a celebrity DJ. I'm not sure. And I never understood it was because I DJ'd at parties that celebrities were at, or because I had a minor celebrity myself from DJing. The whole thing was just like a horrible time in my life, and I turned to heroin. And but I really did. It took me for a long time to like sort of get my credibility back, and so that's why I kind of still wince a little bit when I hear that term. But at the end of the day, people are going to say, make assumptions that they want about you, and the only thing that you can do to combat them is to make good shit, and make shit that's going to stay around and it's going to outlive whatever kind of thing the presses might want to say about you, you know?
Did it ever make you consider just not even DJing for, you know, going on hiatus from that at some point? I mean, it's you know, your bread and butter to some degree, or was, so, but.
Well, the thing was, I didn't really have the option, because that's how I had started this label, Alito. That's how I was playing the lights on, like doing these like DJ gigs I didn't really like. But I decided, I did actually exactly what you said, and I forgot because I haven't talked about it in a while. But I did stopped doing a lot of those parties because I was like, well, if I want people to stop calling me a sort of celebrity DJ, I'm gonna have to stop DJing every fucking movie premiere with like the kind of thing that pops up, and I did, and I had to kind of just figure out my life a little bit around that, and that's around the same time I just started making music strictly.
I want to open things up to any questions that anybody has for Mark. Don't be shy. We have a microphone here. It's ready for you to speak into. So.
Like, he did so much talking. There's nothing left to say.
Hi, I try and articulate this as clearly as possible.
Okay.
Like Jeff said, a lot of the sound in your records is really big, but how do you kind of stay on the right side of big and not go into crowded and noisy and just this
Big
big
and
wall
not
of sound?
bombastic.
Yeah.
I know,
Yes.
I know what you're saying, and I think that sometimes, like the biggest recordings ever really were probably like the biggest pop recordings were like the Phil Spector Wall of Sound, but it was he was such a genius, and it was so reeled in, and it was perfect. It never seemed unruly or unmanageable, and I think there is a tendency now to just because you can. Because technology allows it and whatever, to throw the kitchen sink in, and I think it's just something that you just have to be careful of and be aware that you're not obscuring. At the end of the day, the most important thing in the song is the vocalist and the song. So you kind of add what you want as long as you're not ever going to obscure the great vocal performance or whatever it is. Or the other thing is when you start to add too many things to compensate for the lack of a good song, which I found myself doing. Sometimes you're like, okay, this song's not great, but if we get a brilliant arrangement on it and there's like cool bells and whistles, that's fine. But at the end of the day, the listener's not going to really be listening thinking like, oh, that was a cool part. Like they might for a second, they're just going to be like, that wasn't a great song,
Anybody else?
Hi, just want to ask, you got some big brass sounds going on in your tunes. You have some samples, or you play them with synths, or what are you doing?
That's always all the brass stuff is live, and on some of the more orchestral stuff, sometimes we'll get the orchestra to play behind it. But really, the main horn tracks that are on my stuff is just trumpet, tenor sax, and baritone sax, and it's usually recorded into one mic. And I guess the sound and the bigness of it really is in the force of the playing. I think that's probably what makes it.
So
like
you
that.
tell them how you would like to have it, which notes and stuff.
Yeah, and they're also they're really smart guys and understand music really well, from reggae to funk to soul to jazz. So I might sing a line and they'll be like, oh no, I think you're going to want to, this is going to be better. And especially when they're splitting up the harmonies in the room, because usually they play 3-part harmonies. And that's a part of the reason I think that incredibly lucky is to be work with people that, if I was just sitting in front of an orchestra, you don't have the option. They're just guys that read charts. You don't really have the option to go like, hey, can you play something cool? Like they'll just look at you like you're crazy. But working with the guys that I do, and the same horn players that play with Gabe with the Dap Kings, they're kids that grew up on. Some of them grew up on funk. Some of them grew up on soul. Some of them like Wu-Tang. Like there's that aesthetic like gets its way into everything. So usually like everyone's ideas come into the creative mix at one point.
And who are those players? You name Neil Sugarman?
Neil Sugarman is a saxophone player. There's Dave Guy, who's the trumpet player, who was a really instrumental part of Version, who kind of charted all the horns with me. And then Ian, who plays baritone. And there's another guy, Chemi, that plays baritone too.
Who else?
Not to flog the issue or anything, but you tend to work with, like right now in hip hop and R&B, the producer is like the guy who makes the beat, does everything himself. But you're kind of like different. you work with like lots of live instrumentalists and orchestral arrangements. Now, how do you keep everything in check? Because these guys like have minds of their own, they want to do their own stuff. How do you keep everything on control?
That's a really good question. I mean, sometimes you do have to sort of reel it in, but the thing is that for me, it's always started with the drums and the beat, no matter what kind of music. And you know, when you're making it, even when I was just using the drum machine and chopping up a snare, you could take 5 hours just getting a snare and tuning it, getting the EQ on it that you want. And then I found this drummer Homer that plays in the Dap Kings who grew up listening to the Meters and the RZA, and so everything that he plays, he understands hip hop. It's like when you see Questlove from the Roots play drums, even though he's playing live, he's trying to sound as much like a drum machine as possible. And I just think that you know, sometimes you want everyone to play it straight and to sound like it's almost like a loop or a sample, and sometimes it's good to have that live feel that just makes your stuff sound a little bit different from everything. But I think the fact that I'm lucky enough to work with musicians whose sensibility is very much comes from hip hop as well, is that why it doesn't get too out of hand.
Who else? Anybody? And what sort of setup are you using in terms of your studio?
Well, I actually don't have a studio right now, but the studio that I did my record in, it's a Fostex 8-track tape recording machine. It's a very like home recording type of machine, nothing really special about it, but we just get good sounds on it. And then there's a old MCI board which is very similar to the one that Al Green that they had in High Studios, and the same similar that Sly and Robbie had in Jamaica. And then the computer comes into it much later. Once we've recorded everything to tape, then we might put it into the computer to do some editing, or to do vocals if we're doing more than 4 takes, because you only have 8 tracks on the tape, obviously.
Anybody else?
Which singers you will work now with the new album? Will there be the same singers like the last album, or completely new album?
No, it's all different. The only people the same are Alex Greenwald, who sung the Radiohead cover, and then everybody else is new and upcoming people. I mean, except for Ghostface and Q-Tip, everyone else is sort of more like underground. I think it's important for me to a little bit to. I enjoy working with new artists. I think sometimes it's more fun because their energy and their excitement about being on something is kind of comes across on the record.
And about Amy, you will do the next album, or is it not sure? Or?
I don't know. I haven't got a phone call in a while. I hope so. We'll see.
Anybody else?
Hi. Some of us are just starting out, and this involves a lot of presentation of music to people. This is what I do. You often have 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and especially since like your record was so eclectic, you had all kinds of songs on it. If you have something like that, what's your tip for presenting the best that you can when you have so many different kinds of things that you can present?
Well, if you're talking about you have a lot of different styles of stuff that you make, I would say. I mean, I've been in the same situation. When I had to play my album for someone, I made like a mega mix where I just took made a 5-minute mega mix of trying to kind of cleverly put as many of the songs together in one and let them weave out so you don't get a headache while you're listening to it. But that's a way to do it. Or you just take your absolute best one that you know is like the shit, or maybe the 2, and then you just play those, Yeah,
because there's a tendency to second guess, right? You're like, okay, maybe this one will work here,
Yeah.
maybe that one will work there.
You
really can't tell.
In 5 minutes, I find like a minute of each thing is more than enough.
Okay. Thanks.
Anybody else? Do you want to?
Hi. What's your experience been over the years of working with a record label, A&R types? Mixed, I'd imagine.
I think I definitely, in America, talking to an A&R person, I feel like they're like talking another language. I really don't. And there's a few key A&R people in America that I like dealing with, and most of them happen to be English. And it's not like I'm some like snob at all. Like I've grown up in America since I was 8. My best friends are all from there, but it's just a different thing. America is a huge country, and everybody's supposed to like the same thing, from California to New York and everywhere in between, and Detroit to New Orleans, and that just doesn't happen. There's too many people. Like, it would just be like if someone just decided to draw a circle around half of Europe and say, all right, now all of you are supposed to like the same kind of music. And so there's a tendency in America that everything gets dumbed down because whatever song they have to play on the radio has to work all the way across. So I've just always had a problem there. But there are a couple of A&R people and label people here that I really respect. There's the guy Mike Smith at Columbia. There's someone named Darkest Bees at Universal. And there are some people that I think are cool. But at the end of the day, you just have to really believe in your own shit, not really, I guess, put too much emphasis on the acceptance of others and other people saying, like, hey, this is good, like, and for you to know that it's good,
Okay, any questions from participants at this point? If not, then I would like to ask Mark if you have any parting thoughts that you want to share in conclusion. I want to thank you also for doing this.
No, I don't really have anything. I mean, thank you all for coming and listening and your questions and stuff. And it seems like an amazing program. I mean, because right here, like walking through here and seeing the studios, and right here, this is kind of like everything that I learned on in a funny way, like whether you play guitar or whatever it is. And it's just, it seems like I kind of wish that this was around when I was starting out, but it's nice to get and come here and talk to you. To see you, Jeff.
It's great to see you too, Mark. Everybody, let's say thanks to Mark Ronson.
Thanks.